Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Erica Lockheimer.
Hello, not nervous at all, but anyways, here we go. I've been working in technology for about 20 plus years. And, a lot of that time, majority of that time, I was usually the only woman at the table or the very few engineers in the organization. And, while we're still not there yet, the number's about 20% or so. We still have a long ways to go. But the most important thing is the conversation has changed. And there's a ton of more of awareness. And I know we're on a movement where it's going to be completely different. And so I was reflecting back on, why did this start happening? Why did I even care? I was just kind of used to it, and that's the way things were. I remember going to my first Grace Hopper conference 8 years ago. It was in 2011. And I remember a colleague of mine, Florina and Amy Purnell, they said, hey, let's go to this conference. There's this Grace Hopper's conference. It's super cool, and we should check it out. And those of you that don't know, Grace Hopper Conference is one of the largest conferences for women in technology. And it's a celebration, and they all go there around the world and come together. So we went. It was just us three. And at the time, there was 2,784 attendees. And we walked through the room, the booth. We didn't even have a LinkedIn booth. We saw these other companies, and we were thinking, LinkedIn should probably show up here next year. And I remember us going to the keynote. And that is when the inspiration kicked off for me. When you see a massive room with 2,784 women there, and you see Telle Whitney walk on the stage, that's when my eyes got really, really big. And the theme of the conference at that time was what if, ... You can fill it in with anything you wanted. What if you weren't afraid to ask? What if you wanted to do X? It was just anything you could possibly do. And I remember feeling so inspired along with my colleagues. We went back to LinkedIn and we told our SVP at the time, Kevin Scott, and we said, we need to go there next year for LinkedIn. And he said yes right away. And so we went back, we decided, and we brought 10 women to the Grace Hopper conference, and we had a tiny little booth. And we went there, and we were super excited. And then all of a sudden, I'm roaming around, and we have, our booth and our badges, and we're all excited. And I see Telle Whitney on the floor. And I was like, oh my gosh, she has a line of people ready to talk to her. And I was so nervous. If anybody knows me, I love taking pictures. I think I had a Polaroid camera at the age of 3, I don't know. But I love taking pictures. And I wanted a picture with her so bad to inspire me. And so I was like, should I ask? Should I not ask? Should I ask? Should I ask? So I decided, what do I have to lose? I'm going to go up and ask her. So I said, hey, Telle, can I take a picture with you? And she's like, yeah, sure, come over here. And we get really close. I'm like, yay, we got the picture. And I was so inspired by that moment. And then after that, it became a catalyst where our LinkedIn presence at Grace Hopper just got bigger and bigger. And I've been going 7 years straight. And LinkedIn now, just to put things in perspective, we send over 150 people to LinkedIn, including male allies. We have one of the largest booths there. We do most of our recruiting. We have tons of speakers from LinkedIn go there. And it just gets bigger and bigger. And last year, there was over 20,000 attendees at the Grace Hopper conference. Massively huge. Wow is right. And it sells out in minutes. And what's even better is the male allies that are at LinkedIn, they're all raising their hand like, I want to go. So we only have a select few that go, but I hope you join us next time. So it just became this massive thing. And then 3 years ago, I was at the Grace Hopper conference like I do every single year. And this woman, Pratina, came up to me and she said, I didn't know who she was. She sent me a message, LinkedIn message. I responded. She's like, hey, I'm at the Grace Hopper conference. I'd like to meet you. And I said, sure. And she said, guess what? I'm writing a book. It's called Nevertheless, She Persisted. And I would love for you to be in the book. And I'm like thinking to myself, if anybody also knows me, I hate writing. I'm a horrible writer. I'm really good at math and engineering. That's about it. But I said, sure. And she said, it's going to be really simple. Let's sit in the back of the conference room. I'm going to put a little tape recorder, and I want you to tell my story. And I said, it's great. I hung out with her an hour, and I told her a story. There might have been some tears exchanged. I'm very emotional as well. People know me. And then she said, I'll get back to you when it's published, and all you have to do is edit and say it's yes. And I'm like, okay, that's easy. Great. She reached back to me about a year and a half ago. She said, hey, the book is being published, and guess what? There's 16 plus other women in it. Telle Whitney is one of them. And I was like, holy crap, if I'm allowed to say that live. And I was like, wow. And then guess what happens when you publish a book and you have this community of women in a book? You start being on panels together, you start communicating, and you start having a really great conversation. And I remember after one of the panels about 8 months ago or so, Telle, Whitney, and I had a little chat, and she said, hey, Erica, I have a question for you. When are you going to have me speak at LinkedIn? And that's when my mouth dropped, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's asking me. This is crazy. So I remember going back to my car and sending an email to Rochelle, who owns the speaker series here at LinkedIn, and said, we have to have Telle Whitney here. And she's like, yes. And so here, I want to let you know, hi, my name's Erica Lockheimer. I didn't introduce myself. I'm the VP of Engineering for LinkedIn Learning. I've been at LinkedIn for 9 years. I have the pleasure of welcoming all of you here for the speaker series at LinkedIn, live on the stream, and also for the first time ever, live on my LinkedIn channel too. Let's see how this goes. You're all live. So you're all in it with me together. So without further ado, I definitely want to welcome Telle Whitney to the stage.
Hi, Erica.
Hi. So I'm in awe still, so thank you for being here. And I thought it would be fun because that picture that we took back in 2012, I found it.
Oh,
so
cool.
if we could just pop it up there, I'm sure we all look a little bit different. Pop it up on the screen. Got it? Media production team. Yep, they're on it. Okay, as it comes, because everything's live and And look at the booth. Look at our LinkedIn booth. It was so tiny. We just had like a little scroll. So for those that will see pictures when we go in October, our booth is massively huge and it's crazy and over the top. But anyways, one of my favorite pictures. So one thing that we start off with, our tradition for LinkedIn is tell us what's not on your LinkedIn profile.
One of the things that I really enjoyed was I went to Nepal. I went to the base camp of Mount Everest, went up to 18,000 feet, and I think there's a picture of me hiking up in Gokyo Valley.
Oh, wow.
There we go.
Wow, that's really cool.
It was just a life-changing experience. I can highly encourage you to do it.
All right, next on the list, my bucket list. So another thing that I thought we'd try is just a couple quick hitters, just so we can warm up all here live, and then we'll go into some deep questions. So, if you could have lunch with anyone famous or not, who would that be?
I had lunch 2 weeks ago with Lynn Conway, one of the pioneers in VLSI.
Wow. Love it. Okay, so next question, a little tricky. What's your social platform of choice? Instagram? Go straight for it. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter?
I love LinkedIn.
Good, thank you. Great answer.
And I also use Twitter. So those are really the only two I use.
Okay, safe answer. I love it. Okay, Twitter and LinkedIn. That's good. Okay, what would you like more of?
I would like more organizations to take seriously bringing more women into the R&D positions, especially leadership positions.
What would you like less of?
The hate that we see online.
Yeah, I agree. What band can you listen to at any time?
I'm an Elvis Presley fan since very young age. As is Erica.
So I asked her that and I didn't know. I'm a big Elvis Presley fan too. In fact, all my sisters, we all, our father-daughter dance was to Love Me Tender. Mm-hmm. And every Christmas I listen to It's a Blue Christmas by Elvis Presley. I'm a big fan. So I didn't know it brought tears to my eyes. So good connection.
I saw him 3 times.
So I didn't see him. I heard he's alive still. Okay. What is your favorite time of day?
The morning. The quietness of the morning.
Okay. Love it. What is your best vacation destination?
I went to Morocco last year, and I will go back to Africa as soon as I can.
I haven't been to Africa. It's on my list. So here's a question. Introvert or extrovert?
I'm an introvert by nature, but I've had an extrovert job most of my profession.
Just like this situation.
I guess.
In line on the screen. Okay. I get laughs. I love it. Okay. Your favorite place to think big?
I love the outdoors. I love to walk, and Yosemite is where it feeds my soul.
Got it. I know I'm a big person on running. I'm just being outside, I think it brings a lot of thought. And with the last question, quick hitter, is there a single poem or passage from literature that you have?
The Serenity Prayer is something I say all the time.
And this is where she got me again, because it was my dad's favorite. I lost him 3 years ago, and made me all crazy. But anyways, I think we have a lot of connections inside, so I'm just just completely thrilled to be here with you today. So let's get to some deep questions, because I want to hear everything from your perspective on this. You have had an amazing journey where you've worked in the tech industry, and then you went into a nonprofit. So can you tell me about that journey and that evolution for us?
Yes, I'm a computer scientist, and I went to Caltech, which at the time had this revolutionary VLSI work happening, which was Carver Mead and Lynn Conway were creating this new way of doing systematic design of increasing complexity on a chip. And so I arrived in Silicon Valley when it was still silicon. I mean, everybody here was really silicon, and I worked in the semiconductor industry for quite a few years. As VP of engineering, I was mostly startup kind of person, but creating chip designs, teams. I mean, I love creating things from scratch. But when I got to Silicon Valley, after being at Caltech, where there was only 13% women, I was desperate to meet other women. I mean, just absolutely desperate. And I was unconscious enough to not realize that there was an issue. I wanted to be treated as an engineer. How many people feel that way?
Everybody's hands go up.
But I was systematically going about trying to find other women who were working in technology, and that is how I met my good friend Anita Borg, was when I first moved here. So I worked, in these startups, and Anita and I did a number of things together. I know we're going to talk about some of those in a minute, but and she founded the Institute for Women in Technology. I was there with her, and she was very excited. And really shortly after she founded this nonprofit, she was diagnosed with brain cancer, and she couldn't go on. And I stepped in initially to help her out. Really, I was very reluctant to leave my role as a technology person. It was really kind of how I thought of myself. But I loved the work, and so I was CEO of the Anita Borg Institute. We renamed it in her honor 2 years after she passed, and for 15 years. And it was just an idea when I took it over, and we built it into a formidable organization. So it was a very satisfying and rewarding experience, no question.
Wow. So if you think about that journey, I was looking online, I was reading all the history of the Grace Hopper Conference. It started in 1994, and the stats was the first conference you had 500 attendees, and now it's 20,000. How do you have that evolution of such a large conference and such a movement? It's really globally, and it's become this massive thing. Like, how did that happen?
Well, in the early days, there were a couple of places where women were getting together, and so it kind of came out of this movement. We actually sat down together at a coffee shop in Palo Alto with a piece of paper, not knowing anything about creating a conference. But there was support from the early days, from ACM and CRA and some of the organizations that worked with computer science, mostly academics. And everybody we asked to speak at that first conference said yes. The Turing Award is the most famous award for a technical person, and of all the women that have received the Turing Award, all of them were scheduled to speak at that first Grace Hopper conference.
Wow, that is.
And so it really reached into all the women who were doing remarkable work, and there was a lot of support. It was all done by volunteers for the first few years. We had it every 3 years. The second one, 97, was held here. And for quite a few years, it stayed between 500 and 600. It became part of the Anita Borg Institute when I took over. And once again, it started to grow gradually. I mean, companies were interested in it, but we were talking about, went to 1,000 and went to 1,500. And I do think that there was this time where the world changed and there was a lot more focus on having women in technology. The other thing that happened is because it's really focuses on being a celebration, is that many of the women that attended, it became this nurturing place to go. And so the reason it grew so big was because of the women wanted to be there. And it's unfortunate because we have to turn women away, which seems just almost ridiculous. But
Right.
But it has grown and grown and grown. And as you said, last time it was 22,000. And
Crazy.
it'll continue to grow. The good news is that there's a lot more smaller events that are being held. Keep your eyes out. There's one in New York and London and Australia. And there's been a Grace Hopper celebration in India for quite a few years. So really nice.
That's fabulous. And, one thing that I also notice is a lot more male allies are being part of this. In fact, I just found out our first male from LinkedIn, he's going to be on a panel at Grace Hopper. I'm like so excited for him. Greg Arnold, if you're out there, I'm so excited for him. But, all of this, we're so focused, it's getting bigger and we're scaling. When do you think we'll stop talking about this? To be honest, I've been talking about this for so long, and sometimes it can be draining, but you want to see the results. When do you think we'll stop having to talk about it?
Well, what has happened, as you mentioned, is that there's a lot more focus on this. There's a lot more conversation, a lot more awareness. But the reason you will stop is because it will no longer be an issue. And so you start to see, especially leadership. Right now, I think 6% of this Fortune 500 CEOs are women. There will be a change, and it will come. But that's when you will stop focusing on it.
Got it. So then, do you think we've made progress then? And if so, how has it changed?
I think it's mostly the awareness. That has changed, and the discussion about it. The numbers haven't changed significantly. What I know is that there are organizations that are making a massive change, and then there's some that aren't. Same thing with universities. So there's a huge variance, and that I hope will actually help to change the overall landscape.
Yeah, and I think about our stats and everything. The numbers hasn't changed drastically, maybe 1% or 2%, but the conversations and the awareness, everybody wants a different outcome, and that is where it makes me feel hopeful. So that being said, I focus so much more on male allies. A lot of them come to me and they say, how can I help? And I would love to hear from you any advice that you would give them.
Well, think about this. We want to create a place where it's 50-50. And so to create that kind of change, it's going to be a partnership between men and women. And it isn't going to be you have to have both participate. First of all, there's some great literature out there about what male allies can do. Athena Rising, David Smith, it's really worth reading. Karen Caitlin has a newsletter, if anybody is interested, that comes out once a week that talks about what can male allies do. But I think that there's a few simple things that most men can do. One is that don't accept a speaking engagement that has an all-men lineup.
I love that. That is awesome. It's like everybody's like rolling their eyes, like, of course. But it's simple. It's about being intentional.
It is.
See that. Say something, and expect something different.
And the other thing is just in your day-to-day, in the meetings that you attend, when you see somebody who is not speaking, to actually help them to make sure that everybody in the room has a chance to speak. And if you're the leader, that means you call on them. And when you see somebody who's made a point and then somebody else made that same point and got credit for it, it's very easy to say, oh yes. Just like when Allie said that a few minutes ago, I believe that that's a great idea. So you can, in the basic conversation, make a huge difference.
I really like that advice. In fact, we do that a lot at LinkedIn. And one of the things that we also do is we'll have a retrospect after the meeting. So Mohawk, our SVP of engineering, he'll be like, I don't like how that meeting was handled. So-and-so didn't speak. Let's make a different outcome and be intentional in the next meeting. We are all accountable. We're all participating in this meeting. And to your point, you can just say that simple thing and it'll make a world of difference. So I really love that advice.
Great.
So moving on to another question that I get asked a lot about, which I'm sure you do too, is we talk about the pipeline problem. And so how can we get more women in technology? And what would be your recommendation in solving that?
Certainly it's important to think about the pipeline, and there's some wonderful work right now of introducing computer science curriculum to kindergartners and in grade school as well as middle school and high school. But you have to be careful, because just because you expose kids, both girls and boys at that age, doesn't mean that they're going to stay engaged throughout their life. And if they come through college and then graduate and then find a culture that's not very welcoming to them, all that work to get them into the pipeline will not change it. And it's all too easy to think about the pipeline as what you have to solve, rather than being introspective and think about, okay, as an organization, what do we have to do differently? Because you can attract more women if you have more women in leadership like you.
Thank you. So on that note, how can, we don't have enough women in leadership positions. Why do you think that's the case? What would you do differently? What would be your recommendation to organizations to do?
Well, so there has been some great work in this about companies that have created real change, and thinking in a systematic way about the women that are going through it, being promoted within the organization. To be clear on the criteria for that, to actually think about the pipeline within the organization. So just to give you one example, Telle knew that it didn't have very many women fellows, and so it started to look at the people right below. This fellows is the highest technical role. It looked at the principal engineers, and there was actually quite a few women coming through the pipeline, but they didn't quite understand how to take that next step. And so they looked at skill building within that pipeline, in particular how to present your technical ideas. I mean, this is just one example of how you create change at the next level back. They also looked at the committee that was making decisions about the fellows, which are all white men. And they
trust me, my heart rate is going up right now, because it's like the people that are making the decisions.
Yes.
Look at who they are.
And so what they did was they augmented it with some very senior, seasoned women executives. And so, and they were able to create change.
Yeah. I agree. So
go
I have
for
a lot of built up energy inside, and so you might see it pop out once in a while. So what companies are really making a difference? Who would you call out?
Well, I mentioned Telle. I actually do think that they have approached their change in a systematic way. Satya Nadella from Microsoft came to Grace Hopper a number of years ago and said that women shouldn't ask for raises, and basically globally got blown apart.
Yes.
I'm sure that many of you saw that coverage, but he took it seriously and has made change. His leadership is held accountable for creating change in terms of women. It's taken a few years, but they have actually changed the culture in a pretty significant way. That's two. Another one that's interesting is Godaddy, which when I first started working with them, my board was not very happy with me.
I wonder why.
The ads, and the way that they portrayed women, but they had a new CEO, they had a new system, and they went about, once again, systematically looking at how they promoted, how their workforce was managed, and they have become one of the places where there has been significant change. So those are some examples.
And that's fantastic. So people constantly say, I want to have a more diverse team.
Yes.
And so how do I actually go about doing that, right? And sometimes I hear, should we have quotas or not? I'd love to hear your perspective on quotas, because I definitely have a perspective on quotas. Personally, I would not want to be known to be hired in an organization because they're trying to meet a quota. I want to know that we're hiring the best talent. But I think there's a balance there. What I do believe in quotas is that you should have an equal pipeline. Before I make a decision, have your recruiters get that pipeline in to help make that decision. And so then I'll find the best candidate. What is your position?
Well, certainly the most effective way to change is to make sure that you have a diverse pipeline for the candidates. But here's something that I will admit to you. I'm not a fan of quotas. I never have liked them. But I have seen again and again that they work. And if everybody hired the way that Erica talked about it, or as if you had an organization-wide systematic way of promotions, then you don't need quotas. But the place where quotas have worked is where you're trying to break through a long-held belief of a certain way of doing things. And so in Europe, with board seats, I mean, what has happened is that these boards have then had exposure to women joining the boards and found out they were actually pretty good. So it's a different way. Wow! It's a different way of addressing the issue. I'm not going to get up and say we should have quotas, but you need to look at what actually creates the best results.
Yeah, I agree. And another thing that makes my blood boil a little bit is people will constantly say, but I don't want to lower the bar. And it drives me nuts. And if anything, I feel we are raising the bar when we think about awareness and creating more diverse teams. I think about just LinkedIn. Our mission is create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And I fully believe that the people that are creating that technology need to be diverse. And so I think it's a problem if we don't have that. And it's not about lowering the bar, it's about raising the bar and building the right product. So thank you. People on the stream, we got lots of claps, so. But I would love to hear your perspective on that.
Yes, I mean, it's a question that I receive a lot about, you don't want to lower the bar. And there's this myth, and it is a myth, that there's a meritocracy in Silicon Valley. And it's...
more class.
And if you're part of the people who are, the white male, and it feels like it's all a meritocracy, but if you're not in the power, then it's much harder to break into that. And when you go through changes and you're looking to build a more diverse team, it's going to take a little while to get through that. But I can guarantee you that for the people who are involved with those more diverse teams, they will see the benefit over time. But once again, what you're doing is breaking through some long-held belief. I mean, we all have these views of how things should be. And like I talked about myself when I first came here, I mean, they're very unconscious. I really didn't want to be recognized as a woman computer scientist. I was just a computer scientist. Exactly. But if you realize the micro inequities that happen and the way that you're breaking into things, it takes some real some pull to create change. And the people who are telling you that they don't want to lower the bar don't understand what the enormous upside of opportunity there is.
100% agree. Thank you, Telle. Okay. Everybody's listening, which is awesome. That's how you scale the message. So who is your role model and mentor? And maybe you've had a few throughout, but love to hear that.
So I have been very blessed to have some great people who were both mentors and sponsors, advisors. My PhD thesis advisor was a man named Carver Mead, and he has been an important mentor and friend at this point for many years. And most of my mentors have been men, because the people who had what I wanted were mostly men, especially in the chip industry. I've been very blessed. Maria Clave was the chair of the board at Anita Borg Institute when I joined, and she and I together created much of what you see, and she has been certainly an important role model, mentor, and has been very good. So those are two of them.
And before I ask the last question, where I want to make sure people start lining up at the mic, I like to have a more inclusive and get questions, so please get ready. You mentioned Maria. I don't think many people know her, so could you talk about some of the work that she's done? That'd be really great.
So Maria Clave is currently the president of Harvey Mudd College, which is a science and engineering school top-notch in Southern California. She's done many things, but what she's best known for now is that she has really created a department that's 50% women in computer science, which is unheard of in most of the other universities. And the ways in which she did that, she and her team and the whole school did this, but they changed the curriculum, the introduction to computer science at Harvey Mudd. They brought a lot of their freshmen and sophomores to the Grace Hopper celebration. So during that time where kids are thinking, oh my God, I don't belong here, that they have access to additional role models. And they also had summer research, so that the kids had access, they could see what use some of the computer science ideas were. So there's many universities that have created change. I was part of something called BRAID, which has 15 universities that are taking some of these basic principles and applying to a diverse set of universities. And Maria and I did that together. But in the same way that I said organizations can change, and they really can change if you have support from the top, you see that also in the universities. And there's a lot of diversity of participation through the different universities.
Love it. So I always like to have people have action. So we have this conversation. I don't like to just talk about it. So what would a recommended action that you'd recommend the audience, folks on the stream, what is something that they could do? Something small. It doesn't have to be these massive, big conferences and such. What is something that they can do? What would you recommend?
Well, for many of us, we feel helpless, like we cannot make a difference. But if you think about your life and a way that you could do something small that will make a difference in somebody else. I mean, some examples would be to mentor a young woman or a person of color that has come into your organization that may be new and maybe doesn't quite see where they belong. If you're in a meeting, I mentioned, make sure that if somebody was called on or that wasn't called on, that you point them out or point out their contribution. That can always help. And to just pay attention to other people and speak up, to speak your truth, because it makes such a difference in this one-on-one kind of exchange.
I love your last advice on speak your truth. I think it's about being authentic and that's really hard to do. It's easy to say,
yes,
but being vulnerable in those moments, everybody's shaking their head, it's so hard to do it yourself. So I think speak your truth is a really great advice. So thank you, Telle.
Yes, I mean, this is what I do, and yet the times where close friends have made a pretty obnoxious remark or something that was offensive. I mean, I can always think of the best thing to say 10 minutes later.
That is so true also. You're like, if I would have done this and I would have done that. It's so true. Yeah, so how do we get faster at doing that? But we got to be careful. We can't say whatever is on our mind too, right? It's a balance. Okay. Thank you, Telle. So we have people ready to go.
Okay.
And what's great is it's all these amazing women that are part of our Women in Tech group.
Okay.
All right, Diana, let's go.
Yes. Hi, Telle.
Hi,
We're
Diana.
super excited that you're here with Erica and all of us. Thank you. I am part of the Women in Tech exec member here at LinkedIn, and we're been making many strides in this front. I just wondering, what is the one biggest thing that you think we should go after for future to make it even bigger, to really jump forward and leading us to really bring our mission to life, that is to create this gender parity at the workplace, especially in tech?
So you're talking about what can the Women in Tech group do?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a
biggest
team
thing?
it's 20% of our job. We take it very serious, just like any project that we deliver on. So part of that, the folks, some of them are lined up, they're the action team. They make stuff happen. So they're saying, let's do this.
So ask for, so it's what I see with a lot of women's group is they just get together, they have speakers and other things, but what you really want to do is take some basic change into the organization fabric. And so think about what are the actions that you can ask the leadership for. I mean, some things to consider are to add leadership development skills that you feel are important for women as part of the broad leadership development that's there for all the company. To think about what women want and ask that to be part of some of the benefits that are given to all employees. And then once you know what your key asks are, and keep that, the first time you want to keep them 3. Sit down with the most senior leadership and say, this is what we want to have happen. And then and see what happens.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Diana. All right. Helen.
Thank you both for being here. This is an amazing talk. One question for me, and I think you almost answered it, is we talk about mentors and sponsors a lot. One question is, how are those two different? Mm-hmm. And then how do we ask for sponsorship? Like you mentioned, just go for it and ask. But we are very conscious about our leaders being very busy and having time to run the company. How do we go and ask them to be our sponsors?
Well, so there's a few things that you can do. One is that mentors, it's hard to walk up to somebody and say, will you be my mentor? But the mentor is somebody who provides skill development. I mean, helps you, coaches you. What I find more successful with mentoring is to find people you admire and then just come to them with a problem and ask their advice. So many of the people who are my mentors may not know that they're my mentors.
Don't tell them, Helen.
But if you keep asking them, over time they get to know you and they can be very helpful. Sponsors, quite candidly, are a little trickier. One of the asks from your group could be to create, it's possible to create a sponsorship program, and some companies have done that. That means that you have support from the top. But if you're thinking about how do you find a sponsor, what you want to do is find who the influencers are at the organization. The people, especially that are not in your direct line of hierarchy, who make decisions. And you want to figure out how to get them to know your work. So accept a presentation where some of the influencers are going to be in the room. You really want to have them understand what you're about. I mean, one of my favorite sayings is, it's not who you know.
Is that on purpose?
What?
Extreme close-up. They just did extreme close-up. It was really awkward. Thank you, LinkedIn Media Production Team. I think they have an Easter egg in there for me.
It's not who you know. It's not what you know. It's who knows what you know. And
I like that. Yeah.
And
can you repeat that one more time? Because we were laughing, and I think one tagline.
It's not who you know. It's not what you know. It's who knows what you know.
That's right.
And so finding the people who are making a decision about the position that's not yet posted, and ensuring that they know what you're capable of. And over time, I think it's possible.
Thank you so much, ladies.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. All right, Parul.
You can hear my heart pounding because it's a dream come true listening to Telle Whitney live. So thank you, Erica, for giving us that opportunity to meet Telle live, and maybe I'll have a picture too.
We are definitely taking pictures, like tons of pictures.
So diversity is definitely important for me. Coming from small town in India, definitely I've struggled a lot, and that's why I'm part of Women in Tech executive group, running partnership initiatives like Tech Women and Girls Who Code. And we recently introduced Coder Dojo at LinkedIn to educate our small kids early enough, and not, as you mentioned, that we want diversity in thoughts all across the board. So we wanted to introduce that early. Having said that, as you mentioned, meritocracy in Silicon Valley, I see that impact in kids' life every single day. We see that how much pressure we are putting them and not have that childhood probably we had, have fun and enjoy their life, not think about career when they are like in kindergarten or first grade. Literally, we are like planning ahead of time, 12 years, 15 years ahead of time to make sure they are successful. How do you think we can fix this education system and let the kids enjoy and be kids?
You should go do that.
Next calling.
I don't have kids, and so I'm not as involved with the education system. But I think that you actually know. I mean, I heard it, you say it underneath it with your kids. I mean, you want to have them have exposure to role models and technology, but you want to build in time for them to just be. And you may or may not get support from the school system for that, but for your own kids, you can make those choices. And bringing kids up with all these pressures and responsibilities isn't going to encourage them to do what we want them to do, which is be part of technology. So it's a balance, but I hope that you can also change the local school administration as well as your kids.
I think you have a meeting with your school administration expert. That's not, I mean, one thing, one conversation, you'd be surprised, make a huge difference.
No, I think so too. I agree.
Thank you.
It's truly inspirational to watch the two of you talk. And I think one of my questions, having spent like 16 years in a startup, Telle, for you is, how have you seen startups change from the time that you were the startup girl to like now? Because there is this pragmatic diversity question that comes up when the business really has to show revenue. And you really want like engineers in the seats to like start working on things. And what is intentionally getting changed in Silicon Valley to make sure that there is that pragmatic diversity in that hiring? I know that at LinkedIn, there is a lot of things that we are doing to change, but I haven't really significantly seen things change in startups in Silicon Valley.
Interesting question. So when I went to startups, I mean, these are chip companies, and yet, so there weren't very many women, but there were so few women that there was a lot of support for us. I mean, as long as you were successful, you just got ahead. I've been a little disappointed because whereas a lot of large companies have created significant change, the startups, because they can be formed with so few people, so they don't have HR, they don't have any advice. It's in many ways seems like they're going backwards. There's a friend of mine who just became CEO of the All Raise.
Yeah, Pam.
Pam Koska, who was also part of the book that Erica mentioned. And I do think that they are trying to change some of the startup wisdom from within, because they have a lot of very senior women VCs that are part of this network. But there are companies that are, I mean, once again, this is very organization specific. I mean, I think Etsy has done a great job of making sure that they always had a lot of women in their leadership, in their workforce. But once again, many companies, what they do is that they hire from their network, and so they find themselves at 100, and it's almost all men, and that's when they start to think about it. And the time to think about it is when you're at that first 5 and the first 10, and yet you don't have much of a budget, and you're trying to get a product out. So
And you're trying to hire fast.
That's right. It's hard.
Yeah, it's really hard.
But unfortunately, I haven't seen big change, although it does vary a lot from company to company.
Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. Yes, we have a male ally at the mic. Thank you.
Telle, my name is Ryan.
Hi, Ryan.
In regards to the pipeline and maintaining the interest and encountering your experiences in college, my daughter is completing her junior year, and to my delight, she's a STEM interest for many years. We visited schools in Pasadena. We're going to visit the schools again more heavily this summer. Now, what advice would you have for her to explore, and what kind of questions to ask as she visits these schools, and to maintain that interest, that long-term interest in STEM?
So when you, what you want to do when you visit the schools is to talk to the students, and because every school has its own culture. And I remain on an advisory board for Caltech, for example, and I was 13% women when I went there. They're now closer to 50% women. And in computer science, it's about 40%. So it's really changed. But it has a very intense culture. And so you want to make sure you're talking to the students and understand from them what the culture is like. Certainly talk to the professors, but if I were your daughter, I would want to talk to some students, and not handpicked by
Not plotted.
by the department chair that's trying to recruit you. You know, I mean, you
Smart.
want to actually find the people who can tell you what it's really like, and it varies a lot, and you want to have a match. There's nothing right or wrong about these, but you want to find something that matches your daughter's interests.
Great. Thank
Good
you.
luck. Good luck.
Jaya.
Hi, so thrilled to see you both there. I think I have a multi-part question. So as a woman, and because I also started around 15, 16 years where I would be the only person with very dominating personalities around me. So kind of over a time, sort of got comfortable being in the shadows, not being very comfortable to ask for raises or promotions, and somehow was okay to be, passed on because didn't see any role models there. And I see, like in this room, a lot of very, very young people sitting here, young women. I was sitting next to Anna, who's just passed out of Stanford, and she's here. So how does one go about changing that mindset, both when you're starting and both when you've been in that mindset for a while, where you can see that you're more qualified, but somehow you just don't feel the need, even though inside you kind of get upset with yourself for not doing that? So for example, like when I was joining LinkedIn, my husband this time forced me to prepare a spreadsheet with my current salary and my future salary and what I needed. And if he hadn't forced me, I would have like my every other job, and LinkedIn is probably my 10th or 11th job. I would have just accepted whatever was being offered. So how does one go changing these mindsets? Because it just somehow, I feel guilty even about asking for more money than what is being offered.
Sure. There's a great book called Women Don't Ask. How many people have read it? Well, you should look at it. I mean, it really talks about the overall view of women don't ask, and like 70% of men negotiate the first salary, and 70% of women don't. I mean, there's a generic thing that happens when you are particularly trying to ask, and it's not very comfortable. You just have to practice. Speaking is something that many people are very frightened about, and the way to do the job that many of us need to do, we have to be able to articulate our ideas. So the way you change that is that you practice, and asking for a salary is no different. You have your husband, and who pushes you to do the analysis, and then you figure out how to ask. And the first few times it may not feel right. You may feel like
It'll feel so awkward.
It will feel.
I was just gonna be,
Yes.
I just want to add on, like, I know exactly how you're feeling. I felt that way in my early part of my career. I still have moments where I feel that way, and I think the best thing to Telle's advice is to practice, but more importantly is build a community of people to talk to and have those one-on-one conversations. I'm looking around the room and I'm looking at people in the eyes and they're smiling back to me. I have had those same conversations with them, and going right into that conversation, I talked to them 10 minutes before. And whether it's male allies, female allies, you just have to do it. You have to get over that war zone. It's literally a war zone in your head. And you have to just move forward. And you will mess up. It'll be awkward. It'll be all these things that you're describing. Absolutely true. You just have to do it. And you'll get better at it. Trust me. Trust me. I was nervous being here today. It's hard. It's hard. So do it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good luck.
Good luck.
She's expecting a report.
Yeah,
in
actually,
6 months.
actually, no, that's actually a good point. Anytime I have those conversations, I say, tell me how that conversation went. You have to report back to me. Everybody's time is precious. You just had a conversation, right? Yes.
Thank you for giving us the forum to ask these questions. I'm a mom of 2 boys. My older one recently came home and asked me, Mom, I heard in school, my teacher told me that there is a gap in the pay between what a man makes and a woman makes. And he was shocked. He said, why? I see you working equally hard or more than Dad does. Why is there?
We'll go with the more part.
So he asked me why there is a difference. And I did try to explain him in my mom version, saying the generation now is changing it. And I hope we don't have this difference in your generation. But that was my answer. What would be your suggestion or your answer to this question?
I'll put Erica on the spot and say, what does LinkedIn do about this?
Yeah, so we intentionally look at the difference. Also, it's something as leaders, now me being a leader and managing people, I'm able to look at all of that and I can be intentional about it and make sure that things are fair and things are equal. So that is something that we do intentionally as a company. And I think that people have to be in those positions. When you go back to the point of how can we have more diverse people in leadership positions, so that's true of gender, people of color, everything. You need to have people there that have that awareness and that different sense of thinking to do the right thing. So we will get there, but I think part of it is asking. You have to basically ask, like, where do I stand? And then you also definitely have to have more people in the position of power to make those changes.
Companies that create change, they're doing an audit and they're making a change. I remember a friend of mine who was a very senior manager, she looked at her salaries of her employees and oh my God, the women are making less than the men. And as she thought back over the last year, every one of the men leaders had come into her office and negotiated a higher salary, and the women haven't. So you do need to have a leveling and company-wide.
And if you do the math over time, it turns out to be really bad mathematically for you. So you need to start off fresh. So, yep.
Thank you.
Cool.
Great question.
Hello, Telle. Thanks a lot, Telle and Eric, for such an insightful conversation for us and bring this opportunity to the linking. So, as a woman engineer in the organization, what is something we should do to make things better in Silicon Valley for the women in tech as an individual like me? How can we do to make a better contribution to the community?
Well, I think that we've talked about some of them. I mean, joining the women's group and actually working on actions within the organization is one place that you can make a difference. Working with your local schools. I
was an alumni to San Jose State University. I volunteer all the time through that school, and I notice when I talk to the young girls that are just in college and just giving them that hope in this little conversation. So you'd be surprised in a small room just reaching out to your local community of how much impact you can make. So I believe there's internal stuff to Tally's point, and we have things here at LinkedIn, but definitely go external and think about how you can do it there.
And if you go to the Grace Hopper celebration, the best way to recruit new talent, these young students, is for them to talk to a woman developer and to see how they're thriving at the company. So that you can help there too.
And also it could just be one person. It doesn't have to be a massive amount of people. One person.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, another male ally.
I'm very glad to meet you. This is my first time actually hearing about you, and I wonder why. And it's a big pleasure. I heard you say that there's like the change happening. It's here, however, it's very slow. However, minority women, it's almost non-existent. So in your voice, what are some things we can do to ensure that the change that we see is a change that evolves with everyone as well? Because, as we know, the change we see mostly almost always hit the Black woman last. So what are the ways we can ensure that a change happens with every woman on the same side? Because it's something that needs to happen.
This is a very interesting question. Intersectionality is a very important topic. I actually sit on the board of something called Command It, the Center for Minority and People with Disabilities, and they work with underrepresented minorities. There's a conference called the Tapia Conference that's modeled after the Grace Hopper celebration that actually reaches out to a diverse set of people. And the numbers for especially women of color, are, I mean, you're right, they're wrong. I mean, they're just a lot lower than even for women. I do think that once again, I know how to create change. It's being systematic about them, and to also reach out to your constituents so that you have input. Remember what I was saying about talking the women's group, coming up with a set of actions that they want? I think it's really valuable for different networks to actually think about what is it that we want that would help us, and to build that to go in front of your leadership and ask, and perhaps work together with some of the other networks to come up with things that are common. But the good news is, just as I said with the awareness, is that there's a lot more talk about intersectionality. There's a lot more focus on underrepresented minorities, but the change is slower. I mentioned Intel. One of the reasons that they had created change was that they did this diversity report twice a year. They measured at every step. The women, they actually came out pretty well, but they really did struggle with some of their Black and Latinx. And so they had to create additional programs for those different populations.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, we're ready for one last question. I'm so sorry.
Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. It was great at the beginning to hear about how Grace Hopper has changed over the last 8 years, and Erica, your experience and our experience at LinkedIn there has evolved and grown so much. Telle, I'm curious about how you see the movement and the celebration evolving over the next 8 years, and what your vision and dreams are for that.
Great question.
Well, my dream is that women are at the table creating technology for everything that changes our life. I mean, that's what it's about. Over the next 8 years, I feel like we've been giving a lot of lip service to creating change. And what I would like to see changes in the next 8 years is to actually make systemic change with the organizations that are creating technology. And I think that's possible, but it takes all of you. I mean, you've got to hold your leadership accountable. You've got to stand up, and you've got to ask, and you've got to say, I'm not going to stand it anymore. And then go out and make it so. I mean, that's what I would love to see. Can you tell that?
No, I love it. And that is like a perfect moment to end on. So thank you so much, Telle, Whitney. Thank you, all of you, everyone live on the stream.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Erica.